Il senso religioso o l'esperienza religiosa è innanzitutto un fatto, un fenomeno obiettivo, un fatto reale. Non è un'idea. Innanzitutto non è un modo di sentire. Non solo si tratta di un fatto, di un avvenimento, ma del fatto più imponente e più inestirpabile della storia dell'uomo. Più imponente, più vasto, che neanche il fenomeno dell'amore dell'uomo e della donna, che neanche il fenomeno del rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perché il senso religioso è un avvenimento che pone, che afferma o che ricerca l'orizzonte entro il quale acquisti senso anche il rapporto tra l'uomo e la donna, anche il rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perciò è più vasto, perfino di quelli. Il senso religioso o l'esperienza religiosa è innanzitutto un fatto, un fenomeno obiettivo, un fatto reale. Non è un'idea. Innanzitutto non è un modo di sentire. Non solo si tratta di un fatto, di un avvenimento, ma del fatto più imponente e più inestirpabile della storia dell'uomo. Più imponente, più vasto, che neanche il fenomeno dell'amore dell'uomo e della donna, che neanche il fenomeno del rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perché il senso religioso è un avvenimento che pone, che afferma o che ricerca l'orizzonte entro il quale acquisti senso anche il rapporto tra l'uomo e la donna, anche il rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perciò è più vasto, perfino di quelli.
la civiltà dell'amore. Fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Buonasera.
Good evening, everybody, friends, and thank you for this applause. Thank you. I was ever so worried. I said to our panelists, after they've seen so many things going on, ministers and so on, and there'll be the last four of us losers here, but no, fortunately, you're all here, and you're whistling at us even. You've brought your gang with you. So I'm happy to be at the meeting again because, you know, good news, the inset of the newspaper has been presented at the newspaper, been here since 2017, and so you've brought us good luck. So every year I come here. It's like but I'm really glad to be here. It's really an injection of energy and of many ideas. So I'm really pleased to be here, and I'm grateful always. Thank you, with much affection. We've faced this year, like last year, we're coming back to talk about young people, the educative emergency. And this year, we've given ourselves this theme to growth, a question of encounters, a matter of encounters. It's a word that is very dear in the lexicon of the people of communion liberation, but also it's a word that's dear to all of us, because the theme of relationships is and what makes us grow, what makes us women and men, adults who are responsible. But there are also some objective difficulties. So our guests who are going to help us face this theme, this topic, Alberto Pellai on my side here is a doctor, psychotherapist, a writer, and trainer, educator, and the father of 4 children. So he's got many things going on. And some applause for his wife as well, please. Come on, let's say it. The efforts go on there. Don Claudio Burgio, the chaplain of the Beccaria Juvenile Detention Center, and of the community, from the Kairos community. And after, we want applause for everybody, not just for Don Claudio, otherwise we'll be jealous. Thank you. Thank you for your exhibition, it's great. And then we'll talk about the exhibition that has been set up by 3 different associations with very different aspects, but this is part of the proposal of this for the young people. And Paolo Lattanzio from Save the Children, the social project advisor. And we were saying that when we're speaking of young people, there's many good pieces of news, because many young people constitute really a wealth, an inexhaustible wealth for our country. And also for us adults, where often we have we've done too much harm on the generations that have come up after us. And we haven't perhaps placed ourselves in the right way as educators. In fact, there's a youth emergency which has got worse, certainly after COVID, but which seems to get worse each year. Even in the Corriere, we have been busy often being helped by experts. But today we're talking about youth also because we're talking about NEETs. And the other day on Notizie, we were we had the most recent data from the Statistical Institute, and the percentage of those between 18 and 24 years who've started superior school but hasn't finished. There's a very high percentage. There's the problem of the psychological dissatisfaction among many people, and the use and abuse of drugs, of antidepressants, against anxiety drugs, because the young people have a fatigue in living deep within themselves, so which they can't express. So there's the phenomenon which is growing without measure. So there are 100,000, and that's a lot, young people between 18 and 30 years who don't come out of home, can't leave their home, who have they've chosen this or given this condition of self-isolation. And so it's not the fault of the young people. We will use this word, kids, young people, whatever. That when Don Claudio also and Save the Children also say, I feel it's wrong saying that the kids are wrong. What's wrong is society, and so the problem is how society is searching to give responses. So really, for this reason, I'd like to start from you, Don Claudio, because the theme, the topic of trying to give an answer to them is a very important one. So from the point of view of what you see, the young people you got in front of me, and that you stimulate a lot when you speak to them. I've been to encounters with them here at the meeting even, where these young people feel spoken of. Why is it so important to push the young people to recount their stories? Because we adults often, we think that to know the young people, we think to know all about them, about our kids, about our children, the young people. But often, as they say, we hear them, but we don't listen to them. We don't have the patience or time or the skills, perhaps even, to listen to them in depth, even because we take refuge often in our educative schemes or setups, in our myopia that we have about education, which we think we know where to take them. We have this presumption to fix them into schemes that we've already decided. Instead, it's fundamental to hear their voice. I'm here with a group of young people from a community because it's really important to listen to them. So who comes to our exhibition will have the chance to meet them. So it's fundamental to let them express themselves. Some, maybe for the first time, some have come saying, in front of people, I don't know what to say, what should I say? But everything that they say, every word is for us really, it's like a mine of possibilities to understand their world. One of the ways that these youngsters have is the music, for example, trap music, rap music. We've boycotted in some way this language. We've already labelled it as being with bad adults. We adults have done this. We've stigmatized it to say these are texts that are not very edifying, we say. But in reality, if listened to deeply, they hide the reason for this disappointment, this lack of well-being. And so I'm going to write something which we published, which a text which made me think a lot, like other young people have said. So listening to them, permitting them to speak. And it's they who need to speak. Why do they feel unwell inside? And so very often, where there aren't words, or where these words don't manage to come out, then we have violence. So Daniel Zaccaro, who's a kid, he's grown up by now, he's graduated, etc. But even he came out of our community, and I'd recommend his book, which tells his story. Many of you will know it already. It's called I Was a Bully. And this book tells his story, and it's really when he words entered into his story that he was able to narrate, to recount his story. Why was there this trouble? And so then he was able to change. So concluding, we need to facilitate them to narrate, to recount, without prejudging them, without judging them too readily. Often they say things that aren't, don't quite right, that we couldn't agree with perhaps, but there's a deep difficulty in them that needs to be listened to, which I try to do every day, to get into this narration, these topics, and understand what is the trouble with these children. Because for me, it's an illness of the spirit, I'd say, that they always needed to be accepted. If you can manage, if you're good, if you succeed. And they are kids who at a certain point quit on everything because they don't manage to be to live up to our expectations. So very often they let it all go. And what I hope always to give to them or to find in them is this journey within a meaning. Because if there's no meaning in life, if there's no what we would call value, but it's a word they don't use anymore, if there's no reason, no why, it's important. It's not worth putting lots of effort in, and so otherwise you don't bother, and then nihilism comes up. So, which could be expressed by them in many forms, it's misuse of drugs, etc. So I think the narration, giving their voice, is fundamental. And so this is why in the community, often we do these meetings, or we go to schools, we go in parishes, really to make it so it's them to recount what's going on. And this is what we're doing also here at the exhibition. So, sorry, I'll carry on. This is a gang from Corriere here. Anyway, let's go to Alberto. So Don Claudio, that's his job almost, to work with part of youth where we can say things are broken, to explain a bit this brokenness in the world and for them to accepting society. So now speaking instead of protective factors, what do they need? What do these young people of ours need? So I'd use a sporting metaphor. So if they're growing, your awareness is like a gym, in which when you're in a training course, you need some teammates, you need a playing field, and then you need some good trainers. So the question then is, how do these ingredients, how are they present for our youngsters, for our sons and daughters? What kind of playing fields are we proposing to them? Whether there's been enormous transformations from a real space to a virtual space. So you find yourself having to deal with, to face kids who move very much more within a life that doesn't exist compared to reality. So they invest a lot of their identity in what's virtual. The places for aggregation, for meeting up for them, Don Claudio says it a lot, are often places where the kids, we bring them there because they need to spend money. There are tickets to buy to get in. So what's beginning with, we're getting a bit of the logic from Pinocchio of the cat and the wolf. So like there's that so on your own you can't do it. So they go out into the world. So and they find the cat and the wolf, which is a credible metaphor of very much of what's happening to their growth. We see them no longer as a gym for learning for life, but as a space of consumerism where they always need money in their pockets. because there's somebody who's going to make them spend it. And so the theme, enormous theme, is also that of companions, teammates. What does it mean today, being a team? What does it mean entering a group? What does it mean entering into a band, as I say? And so we hear a lot about that in the papers. What does it mean? What facilities do we have as adults to say to the kids of another family, come to my place, stay with my kids, come study together? Very often, the therapist finds themselves with very isolated families where nobody speaks with anybody. And so you have to ask, where was the last time that you've eaten a pizza with another family? And you realize that they're all closed inside themselves in a little bubble. I see it a lot. On one side, I see that the challenge today is really great. And it's to put adolescence back in the place where it should be, a place in which we need to train for life, a place in which the anxiousness of the parents comes down a bit, and the explorative needs of the children are played out in real life, in contexts in which there are other friends. And let's reflect on the fact that 20 years ago, for a therapist, if a parent went to ask for adolescent help, the children weren't there. They were asked because the parents were out. The kids were out making a mess in the world. But now parents ask because my son's always closed in his bedroom. He doesn't manage to do anything. He has all these challenges, and I can't manage to pull them out of there. So things are really changing the way in which we propose to those who are growing how to throw themselves into life. The other element, I think, speaking of trainers, of coaches, is that our kids need some adults who are good witnesses to them. A question that I often ask myself, that I did as a kid, to my parents, that I asked to my children, when a young person sees an adult who for him should be point of reference, what does he really see? So it's not that you must become like me, but I'll testify to you that living as an adult needs to have in hand a certain space in which you can become that which you should be. So that means putting into play those passions, the enthusiasm. We are adults, we're often fragile, often scared that our children could get hurt. Think also at school, accompanying a class on a trip is in many schools almost impossible now because the adult is scared that then children could get into trouble or get up to something. So I don't want to take that responsibility. The adult must take responsibility for educating. It needs to be truly there. It needs to be a real testimony, a real witness that says, I invite you to courage to bring out your heart within your path of growth. And the last thing that I'd say is that in this moment, we're really scared. We want to protect our children ever more, and so we become scared. And for us psychologists, the rule is that a scared adult is a scary adult. Doesn't have any resource for the growth of the kid. And so we bring out again the passion. We want to rehabilitate life. And so we feel very strongly that this is the most important thing, that really we have the responsibility of witnessing, of testifying. When they look at us, the youngsters should see something that towards which they can aspire, which can motivate them to throw themselves into that, to get busy in this training sphere. Thank you, Alberto. On the theme of adults, of scared adults who become scary adults, we'll come back to that. I often say that one of the most beautiful parts of my family time was great because I had all the children with me. We were all closed together in there. But then I realized that there was an aberration what I was saying, because the children weren't happy to be there, to be locked in with me. But apart from that, I thought they really, there's really the question that they wanted to feel, they were feeling impeded in their ability to leap into life. So I'll go to Paolo now. Save the Children has always had a gaze on that's particularly privileged on the whole idea of children and the troubles of children. And so to prepare this meeting, we met up a couple of times and we said, okay, gosh, you're really a pessimist because we said that COVID was more or less the breaking point, but you said to me it was also the breaking point, but it's also, as educators, they were saying to us already that the situation was becoming grave, serious, and a bit of an emergency. Is it like this?
So I'll start with a hyperbole. I'm a pessimist when I think about the adult world. I'm an optimist when I think about young kids, about the young people. Because between these two worlds, which often don't communicate, I have no doubts on what to do in this phase. COVID, said from a hypochondriac like myself, was a terrible experience, which ruined something which brought to light something that already existed, because many of us saw what happened during COVID as a large increase of inequality, but it's not that inequality exploded thanks to the pandemic. That they were there, the ashes were there, there wasn't enough school supplies, people they weren't having enough food, they weren't getting enough meals per day. The gyms in schools were too small, they were too concentrated in certain regions in Italy, and in large part before COVID, the issues in schools were overlooked. And so if we look at COVID and what it did to young people as something that made inequality explode, I think it's a reductionist view of the pandemic. And so what increased or made explicit the jump from inequality to social injustice. And this is what, let me say, this is what worsened in many moments of worry, of unease, psychologically speaking, that were already there. And on this topic, the answers haven't always been, let's say, productive. They've not always been adequate. So why haven't they been such? It's not because that in Italy we don't have experts or politicians who are able to identify the problems. They've not been adequate because we weren't listening. Don Claudio is right. We don't listen. So as Save the Children, I have it written on my desk, the work I do, our organizational mission, but we don't listen. And one of the most provoking reasons for why every year, with the help of thousands of other realities of other institutions, we chose to set a title which is "How are you?", which is a very simple question that would have allowed us, hopefully, to better understand what young people lived through and adolescents lived through in the worst part of the pandemic, and what they carried with them. That is, what did it mean for them to not meet their partners, to not meet their friends. These experiences, that's radio, music, painting, or even just being together in a physical space, that suddenly we all had to miss, and the kids couldn't benefit from these spaces, and that they couldn't express properly with adequate language what was happening to themselves and what they were feeling. And we need to talk about what the developments and the solutions could be, and everything that happened to these young people during that time. So this great difficulty, which was always present but hidden, and suddenly the pandemic drew to light, with all the unease that each of us, and the young people and especially, suffered through in that time. I'd like to finish this first part of my answer with an anecdote, saying that in those days I was in the infancy commission in Parliament, and with many other deputies, everyone with their own political party, they said, guys, here, we need to put our center of attention on infancy, on young children. The period in which the children who were at home, it was a time when children were at home, but dogs could go for walks. That's what we're talking about. And without a distinction of political affiliation, they looked at us as if we were Martians. So the world had a problem. There was a systematic issue we faced. In infancy, and the elaboration of real social, cultural, sporting, and political communicational solutions that weren't going through. Many times we think about children, and especially under twos, we think about intervening with children, but we look at the parents. So I want policy, I want interventions that go beyond the adult world, that work regardless of the adult world, that don't see children as beneficiaries of something. So go back to what Don Carlo said. We need to stick still and listen. We actually need to listen to understand and what language do these people speak. How can we understand them, and how can we get to the creation together of a model? Because I can write the best social inclusion policy program in the world, the best project ever written, but if I haven't characterized it by looking at the beneficiaries, by looking at those people, by understanding those people, if it wasn't based on an analysis of the region and of the needs of every region, and it would only be an aesthetic piece of writing with no impact. We have to start from there. We don't have a project that starts from work in the field, like in Prato, in Ostia, in Turin, in Bari, and this needs to be the key for social intervention of subsidiarity, with the need to listen, which is absolutely vital. So, Don Claudio, we'll stick to this question that Lattanzio was talking about, this question of how are you, the need to talk to each other, to listen to each other, and to talk. So you often say that there's a kind of illiteracy when it comes to teaching young people, but also adults, to find the words with which to express themselves properly with their words. And this kind of illiteracy is something that's prisoning us, that's locking us in. Yes, so our very individualist culture, it's clear that we've been taught, and they've taught these kids the myth of the self-made man, the man who makes himself, who gets over it by himself, where the word trust there's no space for it. Now we trust each other very little. The kids in our community tell me this a lot. I don't trust the adults. I don't trust my friends, because I don't have any guarantees. And so this mistrust generates this, this analphabetism, generates this feeling that they're alone, and generates a kind of solitude, of loneliness, that then becomes unease. And the loneliness of so many young people is really, it's incredible to look at. It's people who see adults as completely pointless. There was a time when you'd never question an adult, but now they're seen as useless, irrelevant. They're not there. And as a consequence, obviously these kids struggle to decipher, to decode messages that the world, society, culture sends them. So if I think about a phrase of a kid of ours known as baby gang, it's an incredible sentence. It's amazing, but also it makes you think a lot. And at a certain point in his song, he says, "I don't know how to say I love you, because no one's ever taught me how. I tried on my own, but it didn't work." So sometimes this is really what our kids have to face, this illiteracy, because unfortunately they don't have in front of them a role model of true love, of a love that's capable of going beyond time. And then they tell me about the love they have, the quick loves they feel. They tell me that, they have moments, and the moments they have last very little, because at the end of the day, you can't trust them. You can't trust them with everything. It's a very brief thing. So understand that this, therefore, generates over time an inability to face the world and to face the loneliness they suffer from. Because, when you're in your preteen phases, in your adolescence, you have adventures, and you know that they finish. That's one thing, obviously, but then as time goes, the loneliness kills. So what we're trying, and we've tried to tell in the exhibition that we've set up along with Portofranco and Piazzale Mestieri, is specifically this: to try and break this cycle of loneliness. We need to learn how to trust, how to even maybe even let yourself be betrayed if that's the case, but you need to give value to human relationships, to go deeper and to explore them, to give these kids the joy of a relationship that goes beyond convenience and self-interest. Friendship is something serious. And often they would tell me that they don't believe in friendship. They don't believe in the possibility that the chance that an adult could be trustworthy. Maybe in their history they've never found an adult like that they could trust. And I see with many of my teachers how much they struggle to enter into a trusting relationship with the kids. So unfortunately, what this illiteracy generates is that which, unfortunately, we therefore see on TV and on social media, like what happened in Palermo in these recent days. It's the sad consequence of what it means to not have learnt to love, to not have seen what love means, not have been able to experience it in life, of the people who surround them from birth. And so this is our path. It's being alone isn't enough. That you need to found a society in a different culture, no longer founded on the myth of the self-made man, of the man who arrives, the man who puts success above all. But we need to go back, I think, and I'll say this as a priest, but to the roots of the gospel, which teach us something else, a culture that's totally different. And maybe a culture that we've lost. Maybe even the church needs to ask itself a few questions about this, that if it doesn't know how to transmit this culture of faith, of trust anymore. And so I think, and I hope, and we fight every day with these kids to try and help them understand that alone they won't get anywhere. Thank you, Don Paolo. Alberto Pellai. Adults often break apart. We come to pieces when you hear about how our young people are these days, because obviously we've said that they're not wrong. You spoke earlier about scared adults. We don't know how to teach trust. We don't know how to propose to ourselves how reference points that are capable of educated choices, that are important, that are brave. We're also the first parents, as we were saying, as you mentioned earlier, with this kind of double life, with a virtual life and a real life. And so I'd like to ask you, what does it mean for parents? Because obviously even parents come to ask you, perhaps especially adults come and ask you for help. What's missing, and what do you think parents need? What are the skills that could be helpful for them to present themselves differently to young people? I mean, especially for the generation maybe of Paolo, that he still has young children. Our children are already getting older, but we can try and correct what we've been doing. So first of all, we need to do it because otherwise we leave here depressed. So we need to leave here charged, energized, motivated. I think that the most beautiful thing is that our project rewards us with, is that as being parents, is that feeling we have a responsibility that's proactive towards life. You know, adolescent at the end of the day means etymologically speaking, someone that still needs to be nourished. And so the major question is, what type of nourishment do we want to give them as an adult world to those who are growing up? Elisabetta, as you were mentioning, we need to communicate between us parents, because for the first time we found ourselves in human history raising children who all of a sudden have received a proposal of life, of the construction of their own identity that's completely outside of the principles of reality. When we talk about virtual lives, we talk about something that doesn't exist, but that's consuming all of the growth, the pathways of growth of our children. I've written some books that children absolutely hate, that are banned for children below 14. It's all too early. I told children, don't be afraid of technology, but be very careful of the personal use of technology that you bring with you, that becomes part of your body and of your person. So think about how difficult it is even in our home. We've got 4 children who had their first smartphone only at the end of the 3rd year of high school. They would have immediately changed family if they could. You know, what a pain having parents like that. But what's the important thing is I had to ask myself, so what kind of adult awareness do I need to put into play here in this revolution? Is it that everyone has it, you can't stop this? So do I make my making my kids go on a Ferrari when they're only go on a Ferrari when they only know how to drive a go-kart, or do I face all of this and I say, you know what, you start driving your go-kart, and once the time is right, once you've learned, then you can drive a Ferrari. I'll give a clinical example. If the doctors say that there's an incredible problem of school-age children because they're becoming ever more myopic. That means that they can't see far away anymore. They're short-sighted, so they look at small screens up close so much that their brain no longer. The brain is like a muscle. You train it, and it establishes neural connections. Then it later sustains the skills for which it was trained. If you never look up, you never raise your gaze, look at the horizon, your brain learns that you have your whole world right there under your nose, and you'll find it there, with a very close to your face. And we have the first generation of children who can't see well, who are short-sighted. Metaphorically speaking, that means that we've stolen the horizon from them. But concretely speaking, this is an incredible metaphor, because it means, look, the brains of our children, which is ultimately the control room of their body, which defines their future success. It's like that your body builds up according to what exercise you do in the gym. So what exercises do our children do within their own virtual gyms? And now that's how we return the question of the disorientation of parents. I can't do it anymore. You have colleagues or parents who tell you, I spied on my 11-year-old son's smartphone, and I saw that in their chats they were circulating pornographic videos. And I said, you know what? Well, but the scenes of rape, of violence, of paedophilia are being seen by 11 and 12-year-olds. So we ask ourselves, is this the tip of the iceberg here? We see that research says that between 60 and 80% of secondary school age children in their first year of high school, this has become a custom. The idea, I don't want to scare parents. The idea isn't to be afraid of this type of conversation. You ask me, what does it need to be? Parents, it means to be aware. That's what parents need to be. There's an incredibly complex world out there, compared to which we need to generate a way to supervise in an educational manner, to accompany our children. And often the children find themselves alone, and they need to organize their own protective growth, because they protect themselves. They give themselves their own rules. And if you've got 11, 12, 13 years, you need to negotiate rules with them a lot. A lot with their parents. It's that pre-adolescence is like a tsunami. They're explosive in their own brains. They have a part of them that becomes a motivational part, becomes super strong, that drives them to look for pleasure, gratification, instant rewards, and they have a cognitive part that's still very immature. And the neural scans show us this very clearly. And so there's this incredible imbalance between the desire to try everything and the fact that they still don't know how to manage that everything that they want to experience. And it requires us to see that the adult world supervises, is competent, is capable of making adequate responses to this. So us adults, we've left kind of overwhelmed within this revolution, which is generational, but it's also anthropological. We form the brains of our children with totally different characteristics compared to the ones that have always satisfied their needs according to each phase. And maybe we need to become a bit more aware, a bit more competent on that. I feel many times saying that a smartphone is a tool. All you have to do is to teach them how to use it well, and then it won't do any harm. That's not true. A smartphone isn't a tool. A smartphone is an environment with 1 million doors inside of it. You can teach them how to use 3 doors, but then the other 999,997 doors are there for them to discover. So, and I'll close here. What we need to do, the requirement for us parents, the question is, what do our children need in that moment, in that part of their development, when they're 12, 13? Do you need a group? You need theatre, you need youth groups, you need scout groups, things that look at things that are in playgrounds with great teammates, with great trainers. The last thing you need now is a social media profile, and that's what research says, that if you're under 16, 45 to 50% of our children increase in an almost pathological manner their anxiety with respect to, for example, their body image and their self-esteem. There's research that says that to 4 out of 10 children, if you gave them papaya and you told them that they'd be ill if they read it, how many of you would give papaya to your children if research said 4 out of 10 would hurt them? So this research affected us before, and we've always been a bit lost with this now, following all these, what we read. What we need to be now is more competent, more aware of what's going on, and to communicate between us. Many parents look at you and say, "Doctor, this is what everyone's doing it." Well, if it's unhealthy, if it doesn't do well, what does it matter if everyone's doing it? Let's start doing it a bit less then. Communicating between ourselves. Let's be a team, us adults. We've had these experiences of digital communities where really adults are asking themselves these kind of questions, and they're asking when their kids are 5 or 6. Between us adults, let's make a new way how to look at these new topics that are coming up. I think this is a very important theme that I work on, and I really think that we need to slow down quite a lot the kind of virtualness of the existence of our children and put real life back to the center of their experiences. Because often it's us adults who are a bit lost in the virtual world. If we're lost, we who had a brain that's already well connected, well formed, and we struggle in the real world, imagine how difficult it is for a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old who has a brain that still it's not calibrated, doesn't know how to regulate itself, how to manage all of its bodily functions.
Allora,
And so, Paolo, another theme, another topic that's close to the heart of Save the Children is that of presenting the children as our future. But we often load onto our kids, our children. We load onto them many responsibilities which maybe shouldn't be their responsibilities. Maybe the responsibility of presumed errors, presumed failures. We're judging on them. How do you see this side? Yeah, I agree, because I think many times this approach, this attitude, it comes from the fact that apart from projecting yourself onto them, projecting our own deficiencies on them, we're not able to take responsibility ourselves. And so the future's in the hand of the kids. We hear this often. And so what will we give them in their hands? What testimony will we pass on to our children? Because it's not a neutral discourse. And so I think that it's fundamental, an investment on the youngest, but they need also to be put in the right conditions. We've today got a data that there's this generational poverty. So it needs 4 generations to recover the poverty, to close the poverty gap. And these are kind of random gaps. It depends on where you were born, on the situation of your parents, things from which all the kids have no responsibility for this, and no guilt from that, certainly. And so there we need to intervene, because it's right that they are our future. It's correct in certain ways to expect something from them, but the social system needs to function. Otherwise, we dump on them a series of expectations and requirements, anxiousness, as we said, and they're left with empty, bare hands to face the future with. How do you face the future with bare hands? So the parent situation we're talking about is fundamental. We in our projects we seek to accompany in the intervention for the kids with an intervention for the parents, because the participation, the inclusion, even in the scholastic reality, the construction of spaces and environments that are right for the kids is a key component. But taking up take up before birth, during pregnancy, when the parents preparing themselves to be such, and I think that's a fundamental time. So the parents, even those who coming from socio-economic setups that are difficult, that they have the tools to be able to understand and experience that. I find is wonderful that of paternity and being a parent, but it's a war at home. There's a total upturning. So in that preparatory phase to being a parent, and particularly to a healthy paternity, it isn't just that we have children as the possibility and unprepared parents. What happens is that we don't understand what are the tools that the state and the region, the town put available to you. Because there are things that function, and many times that they aren't. People don't know about them. So we believe a lot in really this picking things up early and across many sectors. And I think the question you ask, it's fundamental, and others have spoken of it. It's fundamental, the work in a community. So we said that the personal technology use can become a problem, but on our own we can't cope with this. We can't manage this, and it's there. It's evident. And so the challenge is to activate a community that can make the children able not only to benefit from good proposals which arrive from outside, but also to activate and make them protagonists within their own communities. We can call it the educating community, community of growth, whatever you like, but that makes them able to construct. And sure, there are figures that in Italy are maybe not well known, not well used, that are the outworkers, as a kind of social worker of social activation. Italy, in 3 regions, have got laws that talk about this, that give a norm for this figure. In Puglia, the Rimini, Emilia-Romagna, and Piedmont. And they are regions that recognize 2 things. One, a specific value for the role of the young people who activate the youth community. And we know how much the education between peers has got an enormous potential, much more than that of the traditional scholastic education. And from the other side, apart from recognizing that of peer education, they create healthy forms of links of protagonism, of recognition, of knowledge. So this is something that can be also work, because it is indeed a job, that putting together with common objectives that are healthy and with values, kids who otherwise, for particular social things, wouldn't manage to be put in contact. So I think this is one of the more simple proposals, because it has a sphere of reference that is suggested to us. So starting from proximity and the kids, and then understanding that different places have different needs, because what happens in Giambellino may not be comparable with what happens in Barivecchia. And so the challenge here, and here the word is owed a response, that of putting ourselves in networks, of arranging ourselves so that we can do projects that don't value youth in general, but those particular kids in that space, those particular kids in Barivecchia that have a particular project that has the characteristics that are specific for the context that they're in. And if we don't treat this in a surgical, almost individual way, they risk to just grow the inequalities that are already there, and they'll leave these kids ever more behind. And like we said at the beginning, a project that's really nice, really attractive, but it hasn't gone down into the territory, hasn't come down to those particular needs. And then, as happens to us very often at school, risks being not even attractive because it's been constructed by the image of the others and by the proposals that adults put on the field, which can't be that which went well. Why can't that what went well when I was a kid be right for them? We need to get beyond this. So there's some encouraging information that recently was reported by Open Police. The age band which most gives their availability, the most is up for being volunteers to informal networks, etc., is that which goes from the 19 to the 24 years old. So there's something positive, some positive expectations. There are some of those. So this is a clear message that many young people believe, invest, because they find those attractive proposals which come from the adult world, from the third sector, from different types of dealing with our reality. And so these are principal data that I'd want to say, because if we can manage to involve in this phase, to construct together from below, then evidently there's the possibility to have a social construction that's better. Many of us know, us adults know, that we need a bit more of the courage to take some steps back and leave space for the young people. Last thing, it's said in the meeting in previous days that even businesses ask, why is there a low retention rate when we have kids who come to work for us? Why do they go away? And what do we offer them? What do we put on the plate as the appeal of that work, as an opportunity for growth, as an opportunity to do not necessarily just individual career, but to a healthy course of identification of growth. So the people are often thinking more about the needs of the young people, and this is what we expect from instead of what we expect from them. Thank you all. So let's go towards the conclusion. First, I'll go to Don Claudio, and then for a minute, I'll go to Alberto, and then it's almost dinner time. So before you were saying it's not just we need to mortify and go home depressed. So I work for something called good news. So let's bring ourselves to a more serene dinner time. Oh, this is your favorite newspaper, I hope. I hope you weren't laughing at that. So we're getting close to dinner with a message that opens our hearts a bit to hope, because with this panel we've called a question of growth. Are there encounters, that can motivate parents to seek to do better, to young people to seek to search to get out of their isolation, the even younger to decide to become parents because they have a need to face the theme of the low birth rate. So we need to challenge our young people to not be scared and not putting another obstacle in front. So yeah, I think that the word meeting up, which is a key one of this meeting, is one that's very important, very good even for us families. Often working with families in difficulty with their kids, you realize that they're meeting, encountering almost nobody. They ask the question, when did you last go to eat a pizza with another family? Like I said, maybe 3-4 months. That you don't go out to dinner with anyone, that you don't invite anyone. So I think a good model is that really of generating a micro network of 2 or 3 families with kids of the same age, because there you generate a little community that's educating, and you realize your kids themselves look at the parents of other kids who are friends of theirs, and with a different look to see what are the similarities and the differences between the different parents. And I think another thing that would help help a lot is really trying to invert the narrative, the current one, though we're bringing up a generation that feels themselves constantly spoken about as that the future is a threat, full of risks and few opportunities. It's clear that this narrative impacts strongly on how you move around in growth. So I'd like to say that we as adults have a responsibility not to say lies to them, but to show them that altogether we can really seek to make our life, make the world a better place. And I think a third message that's really important, what is happiness? Fundamentally, we move towards that thing. So in this moment we have a really strong pressure towards having a performance happiness, or one that's very, very citation based. So straight away there's a boost and then there's a fall, and our brain produces a kind of cyclical happiness linked to intimacy, stability, and a sense of belonging, a dimension of the human dimension of relationships, interpersonal ones. This seems rhetorical, but inside it there's a big task to believe fundamentally that nobody saves themselves on their own, that the other person is the important one for saving me, not to saving, but to become a better person. As Paolo said, I think as a father, my kids were the best opportunity I had to seek to become a better man, and finding the pleasure within one's own being a parent means transmitting a testimony of pleasure and beautifulness of life to them. So I close saying, as parents in great difficulty, fathers with the difficulty with their adolescents, make your kid choose an experience that you go away 3 or 4 days together. You together, and put yourself at the disposition of your child, where it'll be up to he to say what he wants to explore, and you'll be the one to guide him to the discovery of the world. These are little, but that leave an incredible imprint, and that they. Thank you. That was very, very nice. Thank you. So now we've got lots of kids who are going to say, I want to go and to rediscover our relationship. Let's go for 5 days to Iceland or something. Well, they'll be seeing monstrous messages like this. Now, you were saying before, a scared adult, a scared adult is a scary adult. And so this is also true the other way around. A sure adult is a reassuring adult, definitely, who shows that all the way the path of life ahead. So this can be the mantra. A certain adult is a reassuring adult. Last word to you. We'll close with Don Paolo. You're also a father, Paolo. So do you find yourself more in the scared parent, or in that which seeks to give serenity and trust? That's a very intimate question. I'm tranquil in this phase, let's say. And then other newspapers are following us. We're all friends here, despite the media. So I'm very tranquil about it. It's very calm. I see my kids that even when they're big, a little bit shy, and then they launch themselves out. And for me and my wife, this was a great gratification that makes me be optimistic on our personal story. And I see them interacting with others, which is something that fills me with trust, because it's an interaction that's healthy, fresh, without prejudices, amongst 7 or 8 years, as they speak nicely, and really something nice comes out. Thank you, Paolo. Thank you very much, Paolo Lattanzio. Thank you for all the work that Save the Children does. Don Claudio, now, given that you're a priest and there's the Holy Spirit who's going to help you, send us to dinner a little bit more serene, both us adults, parents, and also all the young people who are listening to us. Okay. The proposal is very concrete. I've 8 kids from the community. From 8 there, so 8 families who are paying for the dinner, because why not? you'll overcome the anxious anxiety, because really, well, they can manage. So 8 families who are going to offer us dinner. And need 8 families who are going to offer dinner to these kids. It's a great proposal, even because I said to them that they don't come to Rimini in other contexts, that they otherwise Rimini, who it has certain other echoes to them. You're here to come to work, to speak, to recount yourselves. So a nice dinner offered by some of you, 8 families, 8 kids. Doesn't need to last more than half an hour because they wouldn't manage, but then they'll tell you how to overcome anxiety, how to become good parents. Okay? Thank you, everybody. You got it. Do you understand that when we're saying not even a priest for chatting, now there's the priest and he says you need to listen to the kids. It turned the whole thing onto you guys. Okay, I remind you that let's offer dinner to Don Burgio and his kids. Let's go and see the exhibition for those who haven't seen it, that one that's organised by these 3 great associations in our country. And I will call to you also, we need to give a hand to help the meeting, to sustain the meeting. There are the desks spread across the pavilions in the Fiera, the ones called Dona Ora, with the red heart on them. There we can, with serenity, give to support all of this. And let's all learn to have more courage, and let's chuck ourselves into life because it's always worth it. Thank you all. Good evening. Thank you.
La civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Il senso religioso o l'esperienza religiosa è innanzitutto un fatto, un fenomeno obiettivo, un fatto reale. Non è un'idea. Innanzitutto non è un modo di sentire. Non solo si tratta di un fatto, di un avvenimento, ma del fatto più imponente e più inestirpabile della storia dell'uomo. Più imponente, più vasto, che neanche il fenomeno dell'amore dell'uomo e della donna, che neanche il fenomeno del rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perché il senso religioso è un avvenimento che pone, che afferma o che ricerca l'orizzonte entro il quale acquisti senso anche il rapporto tra l'uomo e la donna, anche il rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perciò è più vasto, perfino di quelli